It was nearly midnight when the lights in the kitchen flickered softly in the otherwise silent, sprawling mansion. Rain tapped against the tall windows, and the entire estate, usually buzzing with chatter, footsteps and clinking glasses, now lay still. But in a corner of the kitchen beside the pantry and the industrial refrigerator sat a young woman hunched over a notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration. She was wearing a faded gray maid's uniform. Her name was Eliza. At 19, Eliza had seen more pain than most people did in a lifetime. Her father had died of a stroke when she was just 7. Her mother, unable to afford his funeral, was taken by grief and never truly recovered. By 15, Eliza was the only functioning adult in her home, juggling school and odd jobs to keep the lights on. Eventually, the lights went out anyway. She dropped out of high school and started cleaning homes. One day, by some miracle, or maybe it was fate, she got a call from the housekeeper of the Carlisle estate. The job paid 3 times more than anything she had done before. It was her only shot at rebuilding her life. The Carlisle mansion belonged to Vincent Carlisle, a reclusive billionaire tech mogul who had disappeared from headlines after the tragic death of his wife, Amelia, 4 years prior. The couple had no children, or so the world believed. Vincent hadn't been seen in public in months, and those who worked for him rarely caught a glimpse of the man himself. He kept to his office on the 3rd floor and communicated through short notes passed along by his personal assistant. To Eliza, it was just a job. Clean, be invisible, don't mess up. But that night, as she studied in the kitchen with her second-hand books and flashlight tucked under her chin, she didn't know someone was watching. Vincent Carlisle couldn't sleep. He rarely could anymore. Haunted by regret, by loss, by the image of Amelia's hand slipping from his at the hospital. He roamed his halls in the darkness, glass of scotch in hand, wrapped in a robe that still carried the scent of the cedar chest it came from. That's when he saw the light. Peeking into the kitchen, he expected to find a forgotten bulb left on, or maybe one of the chefs making a midnight snack. But instead he saw her. The maid, slouched over a book, scribbling equations. For a moment he stood frozen, a billionaire watching a maid doing algebra in his kitchen at midnight. She didn't notice him at first, until she dropped her pencil. It rolled across the floor and landed near his feet. She looked up, startled, cheeks flushed in fear. I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean to. I was just... Vincent raised a hand to quiet her. He stepped forward slowly, the hardwood floor creaking beneath him. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly. Eliza opened her mouth, but no words came out. What could she say? That she was secretly preparing to take the GED so she could apply to community college? That her dream was to become a biomedical engineer, despite scrubbing toilets by day? "I'm studying," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "Studying," he echoed, as if the word tasted unfamiliar. "At this hour?" She nodded. His eyes drifted to her notebook. Handwritten diagrams, complicated formulas, and sticky notes layered across the page. It wasn't fluff. It was serious. It was impressive. "You don't belong here," he murmured almost to himself. Her face fell. "No, I didn't mean it like that," he corrected quickly. "I mean, you don't belong in this kind of life. You're too smart." She stared at him, stunned. Nobody had ever said that to her before. He could have walked away. He usually did. But something about her, the quiet desperation, the drive in her eyes, unsettled something deep in his soul, something he had buried long ago. "Come to my study tomorrow," he said abruptly. 10 sharp. Bring your books." And just like that, he turned and vanished into the shadows. Eliza stood frozen for a full minute. What had just happened? The next morning came like a blur. She thought maybe it had been a dream. But at 10 sharp, trembling and unsure, she knocked on the door of the study. "Come in," a voice said. Vincent was seated at a large oak desk, sipping coffee, dressed in a tailored gray suit that didn't quite hide the tired lines on his face. She walked in, clutching her books. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair across from him. "I want to know everything." And so she told him, about her parents, the nights she went hungry, how she used to do her brother's homework before he dropped out, How her dream was to build affordable medical devices so no one like her mother would ever be denied care again. He listened, really listened, and something cracked open in him. "You remind me of someone," he said after a long pause. "Your daughter?" she asked without thinking, then immediately regretted it. He flinched, looked away. "No," he whispered, "my wife." Silence fell. She had touched a wound she hadn't known existed. That day marked the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. He started leaving books on the desk for her. She found notes in the margins, challenging her, correcting her, pushing her further. And then one night, she fell asleep in the study chair. When she woke up, a cashmere blanket was draped over her shoulders. Beside it, a note. "You are not invisible. Not to me." It wasn't just about math anymore. The days turned into weeks, and a strange new rhythm began to take shape inside the cold halls of the Carlisle estate. The mansion, once silent and hollow, began to hum with a faint pulse, one that seemed to trail behind Eliza's quiet footsteps and the crinkle of turning pages in the study. Vincent Carlisle, once a ghost in his own home, found himself waiting for those late-night study sessions. At first, he convinced himself it was curiosity, admiration even, for the girl's grit and intelligence. But there was something else, something deeper. Watching Eliza light up as she solved a problem or excitedly explained a theory reminded him of Amelia, his late wife. Amelia had been just like her, bright, stubborn, relentless in the face of injustice. Vincent began to ask more questions. "What drives you?" he asked one night as they shared a quiet moment over tea, the fireplace casting flickering shadows on the bookshelves. "I guess I don't want to disappear," Eliza replied. "I want to mean something, be someone, not just for me, but for my mom. She gave up everything for us." He nodded, more solemn than usual. Eliza rarely talked about her mother anymore. She had passed away 2 years ago from complications that could have been prevented, had they had the money. One evening, Eliza arrived in the study only to find Vincent gone. Instead, there was an envelope on the desk. Her name, written in black ink. Inside, a letter. "Enrollment confirmation, introductory calculus, Community College of Long Island." Her heart stopped. She gasped aloud, then scanned the rest. He had paid her tuition, all of it. She didn't know what to feel. Gratitude? Terror? She wasn't used to kindness that came without a price. When she found him the next morning in the garden, alone, staring at an old photograph of Amelia, she confronted him. "Why are you helping me?" He turned, startled. Then he looked at her, really looked at her. "I thought I was saving you," he said quietly. "But maybe you're saving me." That should have been the turning point. But fate wasn't finished. The next week, while helping the head housekeeper clean out the attic, Eliza stumbled across a dusty leather trunk. It wasn't labeled, just locked. But something told her this mattered. Later that night, unable to sleep, she picked the lock with a bobby pin, a trick she'd learned from her older brother when he used to sneak candy from the kitchen cabinets. Inside the trunk were old photos, hospital forms, ultrasound printouts, and a single birth certificate. Her breath caught in her throat. The name on the certificate read, Eleanor Rose Carlisle. The mother's name, Amelia Carlisle. And the father, Vincent R. Carlisle. The date of birth was just 2 months after Amelia's last public appearance, before her mysterious death. The same time Vincent had retreated from the world. She read it again and again. Then she looked at herself in the cracked mirror nearby. Her dark, curly hair, her sharp jawline, her almond-shaped eyes. Number it couldn't be. But in her gut, she knew. Her hands trembling, she clutched the certificate and crept down the stairs. The mansion felt like a stranger now. The hallways longer, colder. Her own reflection in the polished wood looked unfamiliar. When she reached the study, Vincent was seated in the leather chair, sipping his usual scotch. He looked up when she entered, and the moment he saw her face, he knew something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, standing. She said nothing, just handed him the certificate. His hands shook as he read it. His lips parted. He sank into the chair as if someone had punched him in the chest. "This can't be," he whispered. Eliza's voice trembled. Did you know? He looked up at her, eyes wide. Number God. No. Amelia never told me. But this is real? She asked, eyes brimming with tears. You believe it? He looked again at the certificate, then at her, then reached for the photo frame on his desk, one of Amelia holding a newborn baby, a photo he hadn't looked at in years. I remember now, he murmured. She went away, for a while, after her diagnosis. I thought it was for treatment, but she was hiding. Hiding you. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Eliza collapsed into the chair across from him, her body trembling. She gave me to someone else, a friend, a woman who raised me as her own. I didn't even know I was adopted until I was 13. Vincent's eyes welled with tears. Amelia. She must have known she was dying. She didn't want you to grow up watching her fade away. A choked sob escaped Eliza's throat. All this time, I've been working in your house, studying under you, and I didn't even know. Neither did I, Vincent said, his voice hoarse. But I should have. He reached across the desk, his hand hesitating. Then slowly Eliza placed hers in his. In that moment, the past didn't matter. She was his daughter, and he had missed 20 years of her life. The next morning felt different, not just for Eliza, but for the entire house. It was as if the chandeliers hung lower, the walls whispered, and the floor creaked more deliberately beneath her feet. The air carried a heaviness neither she nor Vincent could shake, because now everything had changed. Vincent Carlyle was a father, and Eliza was the daughter he never knew he had. They sat together at breakfast for the first time. It was awkward, silent even, not because they didn't want to speak, but because the words had become too heavy, too fragile, like fine glass teetering on the edge of a table. Vincent stirred his coffee slowly. I should have known. There were signs. Amelia grew distant. She stopped attending events, refused to let me visit her during treatment. I thought it was the illness, but she was hiding you. Eliza stared down at her plate, untouched. Her appetite had vanished along with her sense of identity. I think she was trying to protect us both, Eliza said quietly. Maybe she thought you wouldn't want me, that I'd be a burden. Vincent dropped his spoon with a loud clatter. That's not true. If I'd known... He paused, eyes glistening with regret. God, if I'd known. But regrets couldn't rewrite the past, and yet Eliza had never seen him like this. So vulnerable, so desperate for a chance to make things right. Later that week, the truth unraveled further. Vincent ordered a DNA test, not because he doubted her, but because he wanted undeniable proof. Eliza agreed. She needed closure too. The results were in within days. 99.999% match. No doubt, he was her biological father. He asked her to move into one of the guest rooms, to stop working as a maid. He offered to hire her a driver, buy her new clothes, transfer her to a private university. But Eliza hesitated. She wasn't ready to be a Carlyle. She still felt like the girl who used to collect coins under vending machines and eat leftover crusts at diners. The girl who studied in dim libraries and folded sheets until her fingers blistered. She didn't know how to be someone else overnight, especially not the daughter of a billionaire. I need time, she told him. I need to do this my way. Vincent respected that. He didn't push. Instead, he tried to get to know her, bit by bit. Every evening, he'd leave his office to find her. Some nights they played chess. Other nights they watched documentaries. One rainy night, they sat by the fireplace and just talked for hours about music, books, everything and nothing. Still, not everyone in the house approved of the change. Word had started to spread, first among the staff. Then whispers began outside the mansion. Someone, probably a fired chef or disgruntled assistant, had leaked the story to a gossip blog. The headlines spread like wildfire. Billionaire Vincent Carlyle's long-lost daughter found cleaning his toilets. Suddenly, paparazzi were camped outside the gates. Talk shows speculated about Eliza's past. Was she really his daughter? Was it a scam? A setup? Eliza's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Journalists tracked down the woman who had raised her and offered her money for interviews. Strangers dug up her old Facebook posts. A tabloid published a picture of her in her maid uniform with the caption, "From mop to mansion." It was humiliating. She locked herself in her room for 2 days. When Vincent finally managed to get inside, he found her curled up under the blanket, the letter of enrollment crumpled on the floor beside her. "They don't know who I am," she whispered. "To them, I'm a punchline." He sat beside her, his voice low. "Let them talk. We know the truth." "But it hurts," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It hurts so much." He wrapped his arms around her for the first time, not as an employer, not as a billionaire, but as a father, and she let herself break. In the days that followed, he made a public statement, not some rehearsed corporate speech, but a raw, emotional interview where he admitted everything, how he lost his wife, how he never knew about Eliza, and how discovering her had given him a reason to live again. "She's not a scandal," he said on national television. "She's my daughter, and she's the best thing that's ever happened to me." The world softened. Even the harshest headlines began to shift. Suddenly, Eliza wasn't just a tabloid curiosity. She was a symbol, a girl who rose from nothing, a daughter hidden by tragedy, a living reminder that family is more than blood. It's discovery, forgiveness, and the courage to begin again. Autumn came early that year. The trees outside the Carlisle estate turned to fire, burnt orange, deep crimson, golden yellow. Eliza stood at the edge of the garden, watching the leaves fall like memories. It had been 3 months since the world found out who she really was. 3 months since she stopped being the maid, but she still didn't feel like she belonged. Vincent had done everything he could. He cleared her name, protected her privacy, even created a scholarship foundation in Amelia's honor, one that would help other young women like Eliza. He offered her everything: a penthouse, a trust fund, a chance to live a life she never even dared to dream of. But Eliza turned it all down, not out of pride, but because she needed to build something herself, not on his name, not on pity, on her own terms. She continued taking the bus to her community college. She kept her old notebooks, the ones with Vincent's notes scribbled in the margins, and each week she still came back to the mansion, not as a maid, not as a stranger, but as his daughter. One Sunday afternoon, as they walked together through the garden Amelia once loved, Vincent stopped by a bench carved from stone. He looked at Eliza, his face lined with emotion. "There's something I haven't told you," he said, reaching into his coat. He pulled out a small, leather-bound journal. The pages were worn, the corners frayed. Eliza took it gently and opened it. The handwriting was delicate and familiar. It was Amelia's. "She kept this the whole time?" Eliza asked, her voice trembling. Vincent nodded. "She wrote about you. Every day. Even when I didn't know you existed. She did. She loved you so fiercely, Eliza. She was afraid you wouldn't have a future if people knew. So she gave you one in secret." Eliza turned the pages slowly. There were sketches of baby clothes, a list of potential names: Rose, Clara, Eleanor, a note about her first steps, a tiny lock of baby hair tucked between the pages. At the very end, a letter addressed, "To my daughter when you find this." It read, "You are the light I carried when everything else went dark. If you're reading this, it means fate has brought you home. I hope you found your way back to him. Forgive him, Eliza. Forgive me. We did the best we could with broken hearts." Eliza couldn't hold back the sob that broke from her chest. Vincent reached for her hand. "I failed her, and I almost failed you. But if you'll let me, I want to be part of your life." She nodded slowly. "You already are." That evening, Vincent called a press conference, against his usual nature. It was simple, no flashy headlines, just him and Eliza standing side by side. "I want to introduce you to someone," he told the cameras. "This is my daughter, Eleanor Rose Carlisle. But to me, she's Eliza. She's brilliant, she's brave, and she's the future of everything Amelia and I ever hoped for." Eliza spoke too, though her voice trembled. "I'm not here because of money or fame. I'm here because I believe every child who comes from nothing deserves to be seen. And if my story can help just one girl out there believe in herself, then maybe all the pain was worth it." The world listened. The story trended for days, not because of scandal, but because of how it made people feel. One by one, letters began pouring in, from girls in foster care, From single moms working night shifts, from teachers and janitors and students who said, "You made me believe I could do more," Eliza kept every one of them. Months later, she gave her first keynote speech at a Women in STEM event. She wore a simple blue dress and stood tall at the podium. "My father gave me a name," she said, "but I found my voice on my own, and I intend to use it." Vincent sat in the front row, tears in his eyes. He had built empires, led companies, signed billion-dollar deals. But this was his proudest moment. That night, as they stood under the stars on the balcony, Eliza leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you think Mom would be proud?" she whispered. "I think she'd be in awe," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like I am." For the first time in years, Vincent felt at peace. Not because his fortune grew, not because the press adored him again, but because the daughter he never knew he had found her way home. And in doing so, she gave him something no amount of money could ever buy: a second chance.